mission is to protect our environment and our resources and the animals and plants that live here. So we're really happy to have this organization here today. Dominique Walk is here, and she's going to share with you the work that she does for this organization. So there'll be some videos and some slides, and then we'll open it up for questions. You'll notice that Ms. Davies created these QR codes, so if you don't feel comfortable asking questions by raising your hand, you could use your phone to do that, and then I will ask the questions because I love being in front of the mic, so I just want to do that. And so thanks for your attention. Please remember, no headphones on, and put your phones away. And there is recycling and composting over near Miss Craft. All right? Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys for having us. I am going to talk to you guys about marine mammals in the state of Maine and what we do to try to help them. So before we start, how many of you guys knew about marine mammals of Maine before today? Raise your hand. Oh boy, good thing we're here today. Okay, how many people here have seen a seal on the beach? Okay, all right. That's awesome. So were you guys seeing all of these seals in the local South Portland area? Were they in Maine? All right. Great, okay. Well now, hopefully by the end of the presentation, when you see another marine mammal on the beach, you'll know who to call. So we are an organization that responds to marine mammals, which includes any seal, whale, dolphin, porpoise, and then also we respond to sea turtles. And our mission is to provide stranding response and care for those animals, and also to carry out some pretty critical research on these animals, to promote education and conservation throughout the state and beyond for these animals and their environment. And also we work pretty collaboratively with other organizations that do similar work throughout the Northeast as well as the whole U.S. So there are a few different things that we do as an organization. The first program that we have is Stranding Response, and that's one of the more fun ones that we do. We also have a triage center, which also acts as a rehabilitation center, and we'll go over a little bit more about what the difference is between those two things and what functions they serve. We also have our education and outreach program. We are also pretty heavily involved in some research projects as well as our volunteer program. So we'll get through just some of the basic information stuff, and then we'll get into some of the more fun things with videos. But important things for you guys to know about Marine Mammals of Maine is that we're a nonprofit, and we receive the majority of our funding through private foundations and donations. And so a lot of people think that the state is giving us money to carry out this work, but really we're relying on the people here in the state of Maine to help us do this. We have a board of directors, we have 2.5 staff members, and then we also have a volunteer response team of around 80 people. And we typically respond to around 300 marine mammals and sea turtles on an annual basis. And our response region covers the geographic area of Kittery to Rockland. So that's about 2,500 miles of coastline when you include islands. That's a lot of ground to cover, especially with 2.5 staff, but we're fortunate to have a really great volunteer team to help us get to all those 300 animals. Did you guys hear last year at all in the news about all of the seals that were dying here in southern Maine? Everybody hear about that unusual mortality event? So we usually respond to around 300 animals every year. Last year was kind of an anomalous year for us in that we responded to over 1,000, and a lot of that was due to a virus outbreak, porcine distemper virus, which is similar to canine distemper virus, which your dogs get the canine version of. There's a vaccine for that. And so that was what was going through a lot of the seal population, and it's still an active, unusual mortality event for those guys. So to go from 300 to over 1,000 last year was a little bit busy. And even when we don't have an unusual mortality event going on, Marine Mammals of Maine has one of the most active stranding response areas throughout the whole Northeast for seals. All right, so have you guys heard about the Marine Mammal Protection Act at all? No? Okay. So this is a pretty important act that we are governed by. So the Marine Mammal Protection Act was instituted in 1972, and really it requires that people stay at least 150 feet away from any marine mammal. So when you find a seal on the beach, it is actually illegal to approach it within 150 feet under that federal protection. It also makes it illegal to harass animals, and we'll go over what we see for harassment a lot here in the state of Maine. It makes it illegal to feed them, taking selfies with them, or trying to capture or kill them, handling them, and there are violations of up to $10,000 for, or fines of up to $10,000 for violations for that. So through that protection, we are authorized under NOAA Fisheries, which is a federal branch within the government, and they offer us a permit that we have to abide by. And through that permit, we're able to work with marine mammals. Without that authorization, we would not be able to work with them, get within 100 feet of them, and our volunteers operate through that permit as well. So we do operate a reporting hotline, which I think in front of all of you guys there's some brochures that you guys can take. It has our hotline number on it. If you don't get one, definitely come up and grab one before you leave. This is a 24/7 hotline. So if you are anywhere in the state of Maine, if you find any marine mammal or sea turtle, you can call this hotline and it will direct you to either the northern part of the state, which is run by Allied Whale College of the Atlantic, or to Marine Mammals of Maine's response area, which is Clarita Rockland. And it really is a 24/7 hotline. We had actually it was in South Portland, I think, the gray seal. We had a gray seal pup that was, I guess it was Portland. It was in front of Mercy Hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, so we got a call at 2 o'clock in the morning for that. And this little seal was sitting in front of the main doors with the automatic doors just opening and closing, and nobody could get around this little seal. And so we really do have that hotline working 24/7. So we are not the only organization who does this. We're the only people who are doing this in southern and mid-coast Maine, but we are a part of a larger network of people who do this kind of work as well. All right, so now that we got all that stuff out of the way, important things to know, but this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. So the animals that we respond to, primarily the 300 animals we respond to are made up of pinnipeds or seals. And we have 4 species here in Maine. The harbor seal is probably the one that everybody knows the most. That's one of the more popular ones that are seen. They're one of the year-round species, so they are migrating in and out of the Gulf of Maine. And we also have the gray seal, and they are also here year-round and are not highly migratory. So those are year-round animals. But then we get down to the lower ones, and those are our ice seals. So that's really the season that we're in right now, is ice seal season. And we're getting these harpin-hooded seals that are coming down from the Arctic and hanging out here in the Gulf of Maine. And then once it starts to get a little bit warmer, right around now and in the next month, these guys start heading back north. All right, so we'll kind of go through all the different species that we see. This is a video of a harbor seal pup that we responded to in South Bristol in 2014. And this pup, you can see that white fluffy coat. They usually shed that in utero. So when they're born with that coat, it means that they're prematurely born. And I don't know why it won't stay the right side up, but this was right before we collected it. Pretty cute, right? You have to admit. It's going to be really hard to stay 150 feet away from something that looks and sounds like that. So we will be coming into pup season pretty soon. They start pupping in May, but what's a little scary for us is that we've had our first pup as early as April 13th, which is really not that far away. So they could be coming at any point in time, but by mid-May, Memorial Weekend, we are responding to usually around 3 to 4 different harbor seal pups a day. All right, so this is a gray seal. This is the other species that we see here year-round. This one is a yearling, so she's not full-grown, and this one was hanging out in York. And listen to the vocalizations on these guys. They're actually one of the more aggressive species that we get, but when you hear their vocalizations, it's a little hard to take them seriously. So it's kind of like they're spitting at you. You don't really know what they're doing, but they do have in their mouth, instead of having canines, incisors, molars, they pretty much just have all canines. So even though they sound like this and it's hard to take them seriously, they really do have a good set of teeth on them, and they are a very aggressive species. So not an animal that you want to get within 150 feet of, even if it was legal. This is another gray seal pup. This one was just recently born, and this one was collected off of Wells Beach a couple years ago. And this one has that white fluffy lanugo coat on as well. So this one was born prematurely, probably 2 to 3 days old. And this is another reason why you do not want to get very close to them. Just a few days old. Get that last little word in. So, when they have an attitude like this at just a few days old, they definitely can do a lot of damage, so it takes a lot of training for our staff and volunteers to be able to handle them. This little guy was rescued off of Wells Beach and brought to our center because he was pretty underweight and had some infections, and so it was obvious that he was abandoned by his mom. Clearly we got to him before he really started hurting though. This is a juvenile harp seal, and this is one that we actually rescued off of Pine Point in Scarborough back in February. So this is number 33, the 33rd seal of the year that we responded to. She was rescued because of pretty severe dehydration and was brought back to our center. She was released back to the ocean mid-March, so not that long ago. And this is an ice seal, so these are the guys that are coming down from the Arctic, hanging out here, and then head back up north pretty shortly. And these guys, they really live on pack ice, they really like the snow, so while they're in rehabilitation at our center, we try to give them snow, and you'll see why. So after a snowstorm at our center, you'll see everybody nearby is shoveling their walkways, and we're doing the same thing, but we're bringing all of our snow inside instead of trying to get rid of it. And so she looks really cute, but this is also a seal who had a really big personality. She was actually pretty naughty and was always trying to escape, and every time you try to fill her pool, she's turning the water off, so she was a handful. We were happy to let her go. This is a seal that we have at our center right now. She is a yearling harp seal, still one of those Arctic species, and she was rescued from Spruce Head in South Thomaston, Rockland area. I think it's been just over a month now that we've had her. And she was rescued because she was very dehydrated, and she was also significantly underweight. And here is her telling us exactly how she feels about how much we're feeding her. you're expecting to hear coming out from that seal. So this is really the age class that we usually see for the species right now. And so far this year we have responded to over 100 marine mammals. They're primarily this particular species that we just saw. So the last species that we get here is the hooded seal, and these guys we really don't see quite as much as we do the other species. We usually only get maybe 1 or 2 of these guys a year. This is a juvenile hooded seal, so she's not full grown. Another Arctic species, they come down here, hang out for the winter, and then go back up north right around this time of year. And this is the most aggressive species that we get. So this video that you'll see is of an animal that is in really critical condition. She is so dehydrated that she actually has sodium toxicity in her bloodstream, and she was pretty much just in very bad shape. So for an animal that is in that much medical distress to be acting like this, you know, this is not an animal that you want to get within 150 feet of. So that was an animal that we had to tube feed. So we had to restrain her, place a stomach tube, and give her fluids into her stomach orally, and then also we were doing IV fluids on her every few hours to try to get her rehydrated. You guys want to watch it again? Yes. No. So that's a hooded seal. The adult version of these guys, when they're full grown, the males have a red flap that is in their nasal passage, and they will inflate it. It's a big hood that's bright red. They use that for mating, for aggression with other males. We don't usually see the adults down here, thankfully, because when they're only a year old and acting like this, I would really not want the 2,000-pound version of this. Okay, we'll get to some more videos, but it's really important to know some basic seal behavior, because this is what tends to get seals in a lot of trouble. And some of the biggest human interaction cases that we see on a day-to-day basis is just from not knowing the basics about seals. So these guys are semi-aquatic. All 4 of those species that we just saw, they are only semi-aquatic, so they do not need to be in the water. They can be dry as long as they want to be. They don't ever have to go into the water and be wet. They do to find food. So they don't need to be wet, which is important because we do get a lot of people on our hotline who are calling trying to pour water on seals. Now, not only is that not legal under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, but they also don't need to be wet, and it's very stressful for seals to have people get really close to them. A lot of the seals that we have at our center right now, the harp seals, are there because people have initially intervened trying to help them, and it causes them to be extremely stressed out. We do have a seal right now who has ingested a bunch of rocks, so he has rocks stuck in his stomach and his intestines. And that happened as a result of people who were concerned about him and were trying to get him to go back into the water. And their stress response is to eat whatever substrate is underneath them. So unfortunately, he ingested a bunch of rocks, kind of like we eat ice cream when we're stressed out. He ate a bunch of rocks. And so that is something that might become a surgical case, but it's not something that he would be able to survive out on the beach without any kind of intervention. So we deal with a lot of animals that are coming in because of issues from being stressed out from people who are very well-meaning, but not understanding that seals do not need to be wet and they do not have to be in the water. No, not only do they not have to be wet, but it's also normal for them to be out. They use that time to rest, to thermoregulate, to mate, and to have their pups. For seals that aren't doing well, they breathe air, so they really don't want to be swimming if they are not feeling well. So imagine if you have pneumonia, if you're really nauseous and you're vomiting, very painful from an injury, you don't really want to be treading water. Well, these guys don't either, so it's really important for them to be able to have that time out of the water to rest. The other thing that we see a lot of is harbor seal pups that leave their pups on the beach. And if you remember that first video we saw with that white fluffy pup and that really cute sound that they make, Well, it's really hard if you see that on the beach and it's all by itself, and as humans, it's our instinct to want to try to help. It's very abnormal for us to see a baby animal all by itself. But for seals, the moms leave their pups on the beach by themselves and will come back to get them if the beach is quiet. And so if you imagine a little tiny baby seal is not able to be swimming out in the ocean with its mom, keeping up with her, diving while she's trying to find food. So for her to be able to go find food, she has to leave her pup somewhere. And Old Orchard Beach might seem really quiet at 2 o'clock in the morning, but then she comes back at 10 o'clock in the morning and it's not a quiet beach anymore. And so as long as people are not handling the pup, staying away from it, there is a strong chance for the mom to come back for it. And then towards the end of June, early July, pups begin to wean from their mom, so they're nursing from her for around 3 to 3.5 weeks. And then they become fully independent, start hunting on their own. So 33, I think we just saw a video of her, the harp seal that was doing the snow dance in her pool area. This is her getting released. And another thing that we see a lot on the hotline are people who are really concerned about how a seal is moving. They are also concerned that there might be a flipper that's broken or something's not right. They do look very awkward on land. They are really not designed for moving gracefully on the beach, but they are able to be really agile in the water. So this is a seal that we're releasing from rehab. This is about as healthy as they get, and this is just how they naturally move on land. They don't have the same morphology or anatomy as sea lions, so they don't rotate their pelvis under and they don't walk on their front flippers. And so they really do look like that when they're moving across the beach. They don't use their back flippers except for propulsion in the water. And so we do get a lot of people who think that their back flippers are broken. So not only do we respond to pinnipeds or seals, but we also respond to cetaceans, which include any whale, dolphin, porpoise. And so these are just some of the examples of some of the cetaceans that we respond to. They make up only about 10% of the responses that we get in a year, but it is a big part of what we do. And it is a very different kind of response when we get a cetacean. So we did get a North Atlantic right whale, which is one of the most critically endangered whale species in the world right now. And that animal did turn up deceased, unfortunately. That animal was floating off of Booth Bay Harbor, and we worked with Marine Patrol to get out to that whale, towed it back to shore, and then actually towed it into Portland and used a boat lift to get it onto this logging truck, and then transported the body from Portland to Gorham, where we have a compost site, and did the necropsy there. So for any whale or seal that shows up dead, we do try to collect them to perform a necropsy, which is an internal investigation of what may have happened. We're collecting samples from those. So that right whale, the top left photo, is one that we did do a necropsy on. And that photo really just gives you an idea for the size of these guys. So really not easy or particularly cheap to work with these larger animals, but it is really important for us to be able to examine them, whether they're alive or deceased. And they give a lot of clues as to what's going on out in the ocean and what is also going on with the populations themselves. So the minke whale is also, we usually get around 4 or 5 of those a year, usually all deceased. That particular one stranded in Biddeford, and so we were performing the necropsy right there on the beach. The harbor porpoise We do get a handful of those every year. We do get live and deceased for that species. That particular porpoise, we ended up naming Noodle. She stranded in she stranded in Brunswick in 2012. And she was alive, and we transported her to New England Aquarium. We transported her to University of New England for rehabilitation. And she had pneumonia, so she had a really hard time staying afloat and wasn't able to keep her blowhole above water. And so we had to rig together some pool noodles to go under her flippers so that she could swim around and still have access to air. So that's how she got her name Noodle. But to rehabilitate an animal like that, she was only 4.5 feet long, and that was $86,000. So it's very cost prohibitive, and also even just feasibility of moving and working with large animals is very restrictive. We do get dolphins. A lot of people don't know that we get dolphins here, but we get primarily the Atlantic white-sided dolphins as well as common dolphins. And humpback whales, the bottom ones are the long-fin pilot whales, and we do get those live and deceased. When they do show up deceased, those guys are usually around 2,000 to 3,000 pounds, so we do have to work with some heavy equipment to try to remove them from the beach and bring them to some necropsy sites. So cetacean behavior, very different than seals. When you see a cetacean on the beach, it is not normal. When we see a seal on the beach, they could be totally fine, just resting. That's a normal part of their natural history. When these guys are on the beach, there's something very wrong. So it's very important to call Marine Mammals of Maine as soon as possible. So everybody wants to know what some of the biggest threats are to marine mammals. And this is a pretty big topic because this is, I think, is one of the areas where we have the most ability to make a difference. And I will say that there are a lot of different reasons why whales and seals strand. Many of them are not because of humans, but I'm going to focus today on some of the human-related impacts because that's where we can try to change that. So, in general, the majority of the animals that strand are stranding because of things like accidental capture in fishing gear, habitat destruction. Poaching is an issue in the bigger geographic location, but really in Maine, that's not so much an issue. Pollution and marine debris is a huge issue. We do get more and more animals every year that are entangled in marine debris like monofilament line. And then the growing issue is also harassment. So that really includes approaching an animal. We always get people who are trying to take pictures of the seals, walking right up to them to take a selfie. So that's something that we're seeing more and more of and having to deal with. But also we do get boat strikes every year, usually around July or August. So this is an example of some human interaction cases, some harassment that we've documented just in the last 2 years here in Maine. We did get somebody who pulled, a seal pup out of the water, placed it on a kayak, and was kayaking around Biddeford with it. People who pick up the harbor seal pups, and especially when they're by themselves, think that they're abandoned and need to take care of them themselves, and that in and of itself causes abandonment. And for those particular animals, once abandonment has occurred, then there is no chance for survival because they're nursing, and so those do become very critical situations. We also have somebody on Wells Beach who posed with a football with a seal. I don't really know why, but that was the photo that they sent me. That bottom left photo is really something that we see quite often here in Maine. So when our volunteers arrive on the beach, it's not uncommon for them to find huge crowds of people around a seal. And sometimes we don't even see the seal, we know where to go because of the people around it. We also do get people who wrap seals in blankets, and so even though it's the middle of August, it's 80 degrees out, when seals are stressed out, they manifest that stress by shaking, and a lot of people interpret that as a temperature response and not stress. So we do get animals that come in with pretty high temperatures from being wrapped in towels and blankets. This is also something that happened last year in southern Maine. This was a seal that was pretty sick and really needed to be out of the water to rest. And people who were always very well-meaning but felt like the animal needed to be in the water and were dragging it back in. So that is very dangerous because they do have diseases that can be transmitted to people as well as to dogs. It's also very dangerous to handle a seal that way. And then also it's very stressful. So that animal did end up passing away later on further down the beach. So this is just a prime example of what we see every single day, pretty much. This particular picture was taken down in Massachusetts a couple months ago, but there's really a lot of things going on in this picture with people, somebody being right up in a seal's face. This is a juvenile harp seal. And then there's the added factor of the dog as well. And so these are really just some examples of things that we're seeing on a daily basis. And I will say that we deal with some pretty fantastic people as well, and we only know about all of these cases because people take the time to report them to us. And so not all human interactions are bad. We're just focusing on the ones that we can try to share and try to mitigate those events in the future. This is another example of some human interaction cases that aren't necessarily harassment cases, but that is a yearling harbor seal that was rescued from Moose Bay, and it had monofilament line wrapped around the neck. And that's something that we see, they get entangled from it just by finding these pieces of marine debris on the beach or in the ocean and getting entangled in it. That bottom one is a gray seal that was on in Cape Elizabeth. Actually, Bill went to that one. And she had a loose entanglement of monofilament around her head. But really those interactions are coming from finding the trash on the beach and then getting entangled in it. This dolphin on the bottom was from Short Sands in York, and we did her necropsy and found that green balloon stuck in her stomach. So it was basically causing a gastric obstruction. So really the moral of the story for all of this is that if you see a piece of trash on the beach, it really does make a huge difference if you pick it up, because just picking up that one piece can prevent something like this from happening. Other moral of the story is to just stay 150 feet back and help other people know to do that same thing. So some really basic do's and don'ts that we can go through include don'ts: pouring water on the seals, offering food, covering with blankets. The food is a big one. We've gotten people who offer seals canned cat food, French fries, fish fillet, McDonald's sandwiches, pretty much anything you can think of. So they don't eat those things, and they won't take it from you anyway. And then also trying to force an animal back into the water or trying to pull it out of the water. So some really important things that you can do if you see a marine mammal on the beach is to try to keep the area quiet, which means if you see a huge group of people crowding around it, trying to keep people back, trying to keep people away from them, minimizing contact, and teaching other people what to do. So if you're walking down the beach and you see somebody, just letting them know, hey, there's a seal, you might want to keep your dog on a leash. That makes a huge difference for that particular seal. Okay, so when somebody calls the hotline, say you find a seal on Willard Beach and you call Marine Mammals of Maine, we're going to take that information, we're going to dispatch a volunteer, and then once they get there and do an assessment, we have a few different things that we can do once we figure out what's going on with the animal. We can either leave it on the beach and monitor it, which is something that we would do if the animal is fine, it's healthy, and it's in a safe location. We can, if it's an animal that is healthy but is in a bad spot, like Willard Beach, then we will relocate it to a quieter spot. Sometimes we do also have to relocate an animal if it is not doing well, but there's no rehabilitation space available. We can collect for rehabilitation, which is something that we can do if we have the space. We work with a vet to humanely euthanize, and then if it's a deceased animal, then we will perform a necropsy. For cetaceans, like I said, that's really much more limited for what we're able to do. So we might be able to refloat an animal if it's still alive, get it back into the water, or humanely euthanize it. All right, so when we do get a deceased animal, we're doing a lot of necropsy internal investigations to look at things like contaminants, looking for bacteria, parasites, human interactions, all kinds of things. So what probably we're most known for right now is operating our triage center. And this is where it gets a little bit more fun again. We've got some more videos coming up. We used to bring all of our seal rescues to University of New England, but they shut down their facility. So we had to come up with another option to be able to bring animals outside of the state. And so we created a triage center where we can temporarily hold and stabilize seals. So we have a really awesome laboratory that we use where we can run blood work, run a bunch of diagnostic samples, and that really helps us get an idea for what's going on with the seals and helps our vet make treatment plans. So this is kind of what the center looks like. We've added more pools since then, but we are currently rehabbing three harp seals right now. And to date, we have had over 150 seals come through the center since we opened it just a couple years ago. All right, so this is a video of one of my favorite seals. This is 108 from last summer. She was a weanling harbor seal that we rescued, and we did end up getting to release her in October. So a lot of what we have coming through the center are the pups, the little guys, and this is when she first started learning how to eat fish. She went from, we were tube feeding her some formula, some milk, and then we were transitioning her to fish. So this is the day that she finally figured out how to eat fish, and now she's all excited and waiting for us to come feed her. This is one of the treatments that we do pretty frequently for seals that come in. But essentially what was happening there was for animals that have upper respiratory infections or pneumonia, we'll put them in this oxygen-tight chamber, and we will be putting medications vaporized into the chamber so that they're inhaling their antibiotics, which is a really great way to treat respiratory infections. So we've been doing that with a lot of animals. And really, our triage center has made a really big difference in our ability to help seals. So we are really excited about having that so that we can help transport seals off of the beach and get them stable so we can get them to other centers, which is important. We also got a rehab permit, so now we can keep seals for more than just temporary holding. And we only are able to treat up to 4 seals at a time, but we hope to make that bigger. But to put that into perspective, it's about $8,000 to rehab 1 seal. All right, so this is one of our favorite seals that we have rehabbed so far. We just somehow gave her the name Preemie. She was a prematurely born harbor seal pup that was rescued from northern Maine. And this is just a little bit about, I think, her admit. us is that she came in at only 5 kilograms, and typically these guys should be coming in closer to 15 kilograms. So she was the smallest seal that we had ever seen by a long shot. And we really weren't sure if we were going to be able to keep her alive, if we were going to be able to rehabilitate her. She had been abandoned by her mom, and so we really had to think outside of the box to try to get her through a rehab process. But she did actually end up making it. It was not the easiest process. She had quite the attitude, and nothing was done on our time. It was all about what Preemie wanted and when Preemie wanted to eat, but we were really excited about getting her back to the ocean. So we do have some other programs that we do as well besides the really fun stuff with straining response and animal care. So that includes our education and outreach program. And then lastly, our research program. And so this might be something else that is interesting for other students to be getting involved with. We do work with students from all over the state who look at the data that we collect on marine mammals and use that to answer different questions about their environment, about their stranding trends, about their population sizes. We work a lot with the University of Maine at Orono, who has been developing some techniques for researching wild populations of seals using samples collected at our rehab center. So they've been creating some really innovative techniques for less invasive research on wild animals. We do also take samples from all of the animals that we respond to and then that come into the center. So we're taking biological samples and looking for different viruses, different bacteria, especially things that are transmissible to people and to pets as well. And then some of our interesting projects also include satellite tagging some of our seals. So last summer, we did end up rescuing a seal that had the phocine distemper virus, and we were able to successfully rehabilitate her, which is one of the first instances of a seal being successfully released back to the wild after becoming positive for the distemper virus. And so we did satellite tag her, and we were able to track her movements through the Gulf of Maine. And she pretty much booked it out of the Gulf of Maine. Went to Canada, went to New York, went back to Canada, went back off to offshore, and then her tag stopped transmitting, which is normal. So we're not sure what happened to her after that, but you can see some of her basic movements in that top photo. And that really gives us a lot of information about where they're going, what they're doing. There's another group, a nonprofit that tags white sharks, and so we were watching the white shark tags in relation to our harbor seal that we released, and they came very close together, but then they went their separate ways, so that was good. We're also working with students who are looking at some of our blood work that we collect from every single seal and are relating that to some of the climate change parameters that we're seeing in the Gulf of Maine. We have a really unique opportunity because of how quickly the Gulf of Maine is changing environmentally, especially with warming. And so being able to look at different diagnostic values and relating them to some of the climate change is very interesting. And then also we're doing a tagging project for gray seals off of Rockland and working with the pups to satellite tag them, taking a lot of genetic samples and working with different labs around the country for that. And then we've also started a seal disentanglement program where we're using students to get out into the different haul-out areas for gray seals and looking at what animals are entangled, what they might be entangled in, and all creating a baseline data for being able to start disentangling animals in Maine. So that's kind of what we do in a nutshell. I hope you guys learned a lot. Do you have any questions about what we do or how you might want to get involved, things like that?
How do you train your volunteers?
So the question was how we train our volunteers. And it depends on how they're getting involved, but for some of the stranding response, we do have annual trainings that volunteers come to, where we go over things like handling, all the data that we have to collect from every response they go to. Things change really quickly in the field, and so we really rely on our volunteers to be pretty much doing everything out there in the field. So they get a lot of hands-on training at the center and then also in the field
have any questions? I know someone asked about age, like can you volunteer at age 14, and what's the youngest age?
So really we can take volunteers at any age, but if you're under 18, we do require that somebody who's over 18 volunteer with you, and they're the ones who are doing the actual handling of animals just for legal liability purposes. But we do have teams of like a parent and a student who are going out and responding and work as a team to respond. But if you wanted to respond or volunteer with more of like the education outreach stuff, things like that, there is no age limit.